All right, Jesse, nice to see you again.
Nice
Uh,
to see you.
you, Tony. I, you know, it's one of those weird things where it feels weird to tell people I feel like this documentary was made for me, but it's such my jam, but it's so niche in that. But when you watch it, it's not, is the thing. So I'm curious about how you got it made, because you have to get around that very problem of me telling people how interesting I find this, and people going, "Wait, come again?"
I think, you just got to work from that place. Like, I think it's interesting. I love it. Other people hopefully will agree. I think it's a lot of magical thinking to get a film off the ground, particularly one like this, which is political and also formally a little bit experimental, I would say, or at least novel. And it came together very quickly, which is exciting. But I did feel like I had a ticking clock. We had a ticking clock to raise the money, to build the team, to ensure we had all the access we needed. But maybe it's the only way to work. I love that I didn't know, to your point, like I knew there was going to be something fascinating about the form,
Yeah.
that it was documentary and improv theater and dystopian science fiction and kind of a mashup. But I was like we were reaching for references that would sort of help us think about film conceptually, and there was no easy one. Oh yeah, it's that,
Yeah.
which is kind of great too.
Mhm. No, I think it's also interesting to watch and realize that, like you said, there is an improvisational aspect to it, but it's not actors. If you're watching actors do it, there's that little bit of remove. And like, I think depending on who watches it, some people might know almost everyone in the room, right? Depending on how savvy
Yeah,
you are with politics. Some people might not know any name there, right? But they look right. They look the part, and they're taking it seriously. And I think
Yeah.
that I honestly I imagine is the first time you probably breathe a sigh of relief when you're filming is, oh, they don't think this is a game. This is real.
Oh
yeah.
yeah. They went all in. They jumped in with both feet.
Oh, yeah. Um, but
Oh,
when
I just wanted to say, actually, Joey, as you were talking, like I was thinking about films that in which real people play versions of themselves, and there've been some brilliant examples of that, like The Rider, the Chloe Zhao film. Love that film. And I think that, less so in like the documentary side of the equation. Usually that's fiction. It's sort of wholly scripted, which this is in part, but that seems sort of to squarely occupy the fiction space. So I like that these real role players could draw on real world experience, but they are not actors. That's just really kind of an interesting space to be in.
Oh, United 93 is another example of that. The guy in charge of air traffic control is the guy. He's not an actor. And
Uh-huh.
you watch that and go, I feel better watching it in a weird way. And
Yeah.
when
But
you guys,
normally in
yeah,
those films, you have control of casting. We went up there, met those people, and was like, okay, I'm going to put you in my movie. We couldn't cast this film, the role players. We selected who designed the game, who we wanted to feature, but that was an absence of control that made it particularly risky for us.
oh yeah, I think you guys luck out too.
We got very lucky with casting. Steve Bullock is like right out of central casting for a Kennedy-esque president. He's handsome, he's got a great baritone, and he's terrific off the cuff. I mean,
and he,
his penultimate speech is delivered spontaneously from a few notes on the back of a napkin. I wanted to add to your comment, Joey, about how the film snuck up on you, because I think that's sort of what you're saying, that there's a kind of theatrical alchemy that happens, right? And it's what happens when you walk into the theater knowing that everything you're seeing has been created. There's nothing real there. And you sort of relax into giving yourself over to the plot, to the characters, and through empathy, you're transported. And I think that's what happens here. I think that, if this were a conventional documentary about a war game, it would not have nearly the effect it has. I think it pulls people into the room. As Jesse likes to say, it gives you a seat at the table in the situation room, and the stakes are extraordinarily high. You have the experience of being the president and making these decisions.
oh yeah, and I think talk about central casting. He did run for president. That helps. Didn't go amazingly well, but it means that there was a night, at least in his life, where he thought about this situation. He sat in the shower or in the bathroom or in bed and thought about, if I was in this situation, like, so there is something there that you're tapping into.
Yeah.
And the other thing you guys capture so well is how quick and slow time is. Because for more than half of the documentary, I think there are people who yell at the screen like, "Why are they not doing anything?"
Yeah.
Really?
Bullock is really he is from Central Casting, and what's striking about him, and I remember feeling the same way about Pete Buttigieg, is they're both actually really good listeners. They're great political communicators, but they tend to take a lot in. They're not really overly performative. They don't need to talk to fill the space.
Yeah.
And it's a little challenging, right? Because you're like, yeah, do something, do something, do something. And the sort of, it's all building to that moment. And you got 12 people yelling in your ear, which is like really literally what happens to him at the climax of the film. But I do think that's a reflection of presidential decision making in crisis, presuming you have a fairly rational actor in that chair. That maybe presumes a lot.
Well, there's only so many people. But Jesse, you also have a really good habit of with Running with Pete, like when you get them after the fact, you go, "Oh, here's all the things you should have been doing before." Like there's you have a really good way, and this documentary overall, everyone involved who you've seen in political life here shows like who they are as people, which is the thing I think everybody wants to see.
Yeah.
And you just, for some reason, everyone's been trained not to do. It's why you see, we're recording this in the midst of a very unusual couple weeks in politics, but like, what's the most like coherent argument you've heard this week is that one of the candidates is weird. It's so simple, and it's what everyone in real life says. And suddenly politicians go, what if we just said that? As opposed to some made up or highfalutin thing that's not going to track. Like, I think you guys do such a good job of getting to the core of that.
Well, I think what we're able to show people is what you don't see in politics too, which is like, and we saw a little bit in debate prep in the Pete Buttigieg film, which is a peering behind the curtain. Forget the performative piece, giving a speech. It's actually like wrestling with really profound existential, political, and legal questions. And you know what they say about the president, like if it ends up on his desk, it's a really thorny problem because everything lesser than that is dealt with by his subordinates. Okay. And this question that he's dealing with in this film is a particularly thorny one. Deployment of active duty military on domestic soil. Talk about taboos in our country. And I think it's hypnotizing to watch them wrestle with this question.
Oh yeah. And I think the other thing you guys do really well as we sort of start to wrap up is in, like you said, having control over the game, making it not impossible, but making it hard. Because I think there is a way to, I think there's the instinct to be like, well, what's the worst case scenario? We'll just do it. But I think you guys have a really interesting way of doing, this is more complicated than what we faced, but we think there is a way to win the game, for lack of a better word. And I think watching it become apparent was incredibly satisfying in a weird way. Like, it's a terrifying movie, but you somehow leave heightened that like, oh, this won't just ruin us if it happens. There's a way to do it. And designing that, I imagine, is probably the other hardest part of this. How did you feel comfortable, both of you, with where you guys set up the start? Because you don't know what's going to happen once it starts.
No, we had no idea. I mean, one of the things that's really so resonant in the film, I think, is the idea of messaging. Yeah. Before President Hotham gives the penultimate speech, his advisor, the senior advisor to the president, Heidi Heitkamp, says, "Mr. President, the American people just want to know when they wake up tomorrow that they still have a democracy." All right. So that's sort of setting a bar for him. And we know he's about to go out and improvise a speech. And we know it's just in our little White House press briefing room. But in his heart and in his mind, he's speaking to a nation. Right. He's speaking to foreign allies. And you think of the pressure of that moment. And he's got his notes on the back of a napkin. And he delivers this extraordinary speech. Like, how are you going to convince people with words that we still have a democracy? I find that moment so compelling and so beautiful.
And I think complementary to that, Tony, is the moment of dialogue that comes to mind, Joey, is when I think it's Wes Clark says, or Jeff Buchanan, these guys who came out of the military, if you're a hammer, every problem is a nail. You're the instrument of violence. The military is an instrument of violence. That's really its function. And what we see here is the power of restraint. Yeah. And when Chris Jones, who was deployed as a Marine in Afghanistan, says, I've seen, I've seen what it looks like when a country comes apart. and you don't want that, and I think that those are the words that haunt me when I think about the sort of the power of this story.
Oh yeah, no. If you don't, if as we wrap, if you don't watch this and think about how it could have happened, the movie's failed. And I think it's impossible not to watch this and go, there is another way.
That's
And
right.
that's not good. But I think the strength of this is that you feel like that's not inevitable. And I think a lesser movie, you wouldn't believe that this was achievable. You would go, okay, this is a movie. And the
Yeah.
other way is what'll inevitably happen. And I think you watch this and go, I think we watched the likelier scenario. It's not easy, but I think we watched the likelier scenario. And that's kind of incredible. So you guys should just be just massively proud of it.
Well,
I mean,
your lips to God's ears.
yeah.
Oh yeah. I can't wait for more people to see it. It's so unique and it's entertaining too. I think we did a bad job of explaining that, but it's thrilling in a way that you can get something out of, while also I think learning and God, more people need to learn things. So I really hope people see this movie.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
thank you guys. Thank you guys for doing this.
Thanks, Joey.